self-promotional listicles, if done well, are not bad. If they're written well, I don't actually think it's like a scammy tactic, because you can argue it's satisfying the intent of what someone's searching for, and we're not trying to be dishonest in terms of the way that we're listing companies in there, or trying to force rank them, or even just trying to hide the fact that we are talking about our own client in the blog post. But I will say that many people don't approach listicles the same way that we think about them.
For us, we rank and convert for like a tons of clients using this for tons of keywords. But here's the more honest approach to actually writing these. You don't need to call yourself the best. You just talk about yourself first, and talk about yourself in detail, and sell your value propositions in an honest, authentic, and transparent way where you say, hey, this is who we are. This is how we designed our product or its features, or this is how we build our service and strategy around our agency. And if this is for you, great. And you just talk about that at length. You don't have to say we're the best. Welcome back to the Grow and Convert Marketing Show. I'm Davish, that's Benji. Today we're going to talk about something that even our own clients have been bringing up, because this narrative and a few pieces by influential SEO folks has been kind of going viral or going viral in our little nerdy SEO community online, which basically these narratives are that, well, I'm going to start with something very specific, which is this idea that self-promotional list posts are not working, or are even hurting sites. And then we're going to talk in the second half about kind of what we think is a related narrative for GEO, that your own content doesn't really help in GEO and it's offsite content. So let's start with the SEO narrative. That seems to have started from a Substack post off of Lily Ray's Substack newsletter. Lily Ray, for those that don't know, is a prominent voice in the SEO space. We sort of seen her on LinkedIn, and she's commented back. And honestly, we generally tend to agree with most of the things she says. And so she's well respected. And we saw this initial post, and of course, that has a lot of relationship to what we do, or it's related heavily to what we do, because we've been talking about this in our own terminology. We call them like category keywords. It's a subset of pain point SEO keywords. We've been going after category keywords for, 7, 8 years, and they've worked extremely well. And then we had our own client, one of our own clients, actually Slack us the article and saying, you guys, like, our self-promotional listicles dead, and should we do something else? And to cut to the chase,
multiple clients have said that, actually. And beyond just producing the listicles, I don't know if we were the first ones to do it, but I want to say we were one of the stronger voices in terms of explaining why you should list your company first in a list post, when it was more normal, I think, probably before we got started doing this, to list your company somewhere in the list post. Like, maybe not as the first person, but maybe like 2 or 3 spaces down,
or sometimes last. I've seen it also last.
Yeah, last. But we made the argument after testing this a little bit that it just makes sense from a conversion rate optimization perspective to list yourself first, because many people don't even make their way down in that list.
Yeah. So we have an entire written article on our blog that is going to come out about this. And that's going to go into a lot of the like nitty gritty details of the data. So I want to try to make sure that this is interesting to listen to as a podcast or watch and listen to on YouTube. So I don't want to spend too much time in like the nitty gritty of the data, but we're going to go over, because you can read that in the blog post, which we'll put in the show notes, of course. But we're going to go into sort of the main takeaways. So overall, when we look at her article, Lily Ray's article, basically the data presented, she sort of dissects, I think it's something like 6 to 10, somewhere around 5 to 10 prominent, mostly or entirely SaaS company blogs. She anonymizes them, but she also puts like the screenshots of the SERPs and the article. So you can just like Google the exact text of the article and find out it's like some big brands mostly that you've heard of. And what she notices, what she points out is she uses, I forget the exact, it's not SimilarWeb, but it's a competitor, like this traffic monitoring of competitors tool, kind of like SimilarWeb. She uses that and shows that they have all seem to have had a significant traffic dip in this very specific time window in late January 2026. And I think her Substack is dated February 3rd. So like all of the graphs she presents have these like quick dips at the end. And for those that are watching on YouTube, I can share my screen so that you can kind of follow along a little bit. Like here are these just, it's like the graph starts at 2021 on the left side. So it's really zoomed out. And right at the end, around, in this case, February 2026, there's this dip in overall traffic. And this other one, it's right around the same time. So like over and over again, like, blog after blog. But the larger point is she's showing this sort of third-party estimate or whatever of overall blog traffic and saying, there is a dip right at the end of January. And then she's saying, I noticed that in this blog and that blog and that blog in her examples, they happen to have something like dozens or in most of them hundreds of what she defines as a self-promotional listicle. So basically what was caught our eye and what became important to us is we said, well, wait a minute. We publish tons of these for our clients. We monitor the rankings, the traffic, and the conversions for all of these because we sort of have to. It's what we do. This is not entirely what we do, by the way, but like what we do is publish content that ranks for SEO keywords and converts, right? And so like we're on monthly calls with clients. So we would know, and we're just asking around. We sort of had an internal discussion, and everyone's like, no, I haven't seen any dip recently. And so we're like, what is going on? So I dug into this article and I noticed the first kind of, issue or objection I have is that is correlation, not causation. Specifically, what I just mentioned she has is you're looking at overall blog traffic happening to have a dip in late January or early February, and you're saying, hey, this blog also happens to have dozens or hundreds of these self-promotional listicles. And so then immediately I'm like, hold on, does she isolate the ranking position or traffic of those self-promotional listicles? And I don't see that in the article, which I thought was interesting. And so I was like, well, we can just look at ours. We have dozens of those as well. And when I looked over and over and over again in ours, I saw absolutely no change in ranking. So immediately I was like, we need to publish this if for no other reason than to have something on our site that shows the counter narrative to our own clients or to prospects that are like, hey, like I've heard this online or whatever. And so that's kind of the big thing. The other key detail there is one of the first examples she shows is a very prominent SaaS company. And she even says it has something like, let me scroll so I don't get this wrong, 30,000 articles indexed on the blog, on just the blog. And 191 of them she defines as self-promotional listicles. And we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the definition of that in a second. So then that was the other thing that kind of caught my eye where I was like, hold up. We're saying a blog with 30,000 articles on it happened to see a traffic dip. And then under 200 of those 30,000 were this one type of content. And we're saying that type of content's responsible, but we haven't actually looked and seen whether I'm seeing no evidence presented that those 191, like I'm not seeing a dissection of their ranking positions or their traffic isolated to say like, oh, they've all tanked in ranking. And then I can look at our own client data and be like, we have a ton of these and their rankings seem to be completely fine. And that's the core of kind of what we're publishing. I'm going to pause there, Benji, if you have any questions or comments.
No, I don't really have any questions on that.
Yeah. So next key item is the definition of a self-promotional listicle. So like, if just to recap, what I'm saying is in our data, we have a ton of these, and when we are isolating the actual ranking position of that themselves, um, and 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 we're not seeing any decline. I actually, before I get to the definition, I should say I want to be very particular and not put words into Lily Ray's mouth. To be fair, she never says or claims that there's proof here. And the article itself, let me actually screen share one more time.
It's more like raising the question, is this the cause?
Yeah.
And then showing the traffic graphs and kind of leaving it
Yeah,
at
the
that.
title of our article is Google finally cracking down on self-promotional listicles? So it's a question. Then the subtitle is also interesting. The most popular GEO tactic might indeed be risky for SEO purposes after all. Might is a key thing. And in one of the parts of her examples, she even says like it was a tiny fraction. It was like less than 1% or something like that. Like there was, oh, here's one example where she says the blog had 1,400 articles and 61, only 4% are self-promotional listicles. And another one, it was like 0.6%. I calculated all of this. It's in our counter article or our article about this, where we have like the percentage. So to be fair, she's just raising this as a possibility and a question. But what I say in our article that we're about to publish is, but even raising the question, especially when you have a platform like she does, it affects decision making. Because then, like, I think it was Search Engine Journal, like, did like a kind of a syndication of this or their own article and linked to hers and said, hey, like, this is a thing. And then people are looking at this, and most people are not going to closely look at the details like I'm doing here. And they're going to be like, oh my gosh, just like our clients, and be like, you guys, should we change strategies?
Or people cherry pick quotes from this article and publish them on LinkedIn
Yeah.
and don't get into the nuance of what she's trying to say. And so this becomes a popular narrative that says basically the self-promotional listicles are dead. And that is largely the reason why I think it's probably been brought up on, I would say, 4 or 5 different client calls over the last month or two, just seeing these articles and then raising the question, should we still do this? Is there a risk to doing this? And yeah, that was the reason for really doing this video and writing the article.
Yeah, so you can go to our article to see the exact examples, and maybe we'll share them in a second here as well. But let's do that first. Let's actually now look at some of these examples and of our own.
Maybe before we even get into the examples, there's hypotheses that I have in terms of why certain sites are getting hit from this. Like maybe in those examples, it doesn't necessarily show that certain sites are getting hit from the self-promotional listicles, but just from what I've seen, I think marketers are great at taking a strategy that works and just running it into the ground by like trying to
Over
like
automate.
take it to the extreme and just they take a concept and there's like a lot of nuance in how that concept is done or how it works, and they just basically try to take as many shortcuts as possible to just game the system, and then that ruins the whole like channel or tactic here. I mean, you could think back to 5 years ago, the term growth hacker. Like 10 years ago, the term growth hacker was this term that was seen as like at the forefront of Silicon Valley and what people needed to do in growth. And the idea was basically you come into a channel, you test it, and you scale up what works, essentially. If you're like breaking it down simply, and then you see a whole wave of marketers branding themselves as growth hackers and basically just doing really scammy tactics. And then the whole term growth hacker kind of dies because the masses took it and ran with it and basically ran it into the ground because they took like some of the principles and just didn't do it well and didn't do it correctly. And then just like the whole thing died. And it's kind of the same thing here where self-promotional listicles, if done well, are not bad. Like the examples that we're going to show, if they're written well, I don't actually think it's like a scammy tactic because you can argue it's satisfying the intent of what someone's searching for. And we're not trying to be dishonest in terms of the way that we're listing companies in there, trying to force rank them, or even just trying to hide the fact that we are talking about our own client in the blog post. But I will say that many people don't approach listicles the same way that we think about them.
Yeah.
And so
So
they see this tactic working and they kind of take certain elements that we think are important in the way that we write them, and they completely disregard that, and they produce hundreds of them for terms that are not actually relevant to their business. They actually do try to force rank them. They do try to hide, they create some fake persona at the company that comes across as some third party expert, and then tries to say that this company is the best and hide the fact that this person actually works for the company. So I do think that there's a lot of validity to what Lily is saying, in that there's a good portion of marketers who are just taking this tactic that is working well and just not doing it the proper way.
yeah, let me do something I probably should have done at the beginning, and you kind of already made the argument. Let's define it.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
probably should have done it at the beginning. So self-promotional listicle, what does that mean? It's a list post that almost always is going after what we in Grow and Convert terminology call category keywords, basically things like best CRM software, in our case, best content marketing agency. And in fact, you can remove the best. We don't even target the best. You sort of end up ranking for the term best as well. Just CRM software, content marketing agency. We're going to show an example here from a client, trucking management software. And what she calls a self-promotional listicle is the intent of that blog post obviously is that the user wants to list. You're typing in best CRM software, you want to list the CRM software. And she's saying there's these companies who are themselves CRM software who then write this post, and this is an important detail. She says, and they put themselves as number one on this list. And even sometimes pretend it is, or act as though it is some objective list where they evaluated all the options and voila, they came out ahead in some objective set of criteria. And she's saying this is sort of like misleading and self-serving.
I could pull up some examples too. I didn't have this up before, but it jogs my memory of one that I came across recently that I
I
think
actually
is,
thought about like listing a bunch of these examples in the published article, and I was like, no, I don't want to give these people links or these article links. But like, as you pull up those examples, what I'll say is, as you said, that is misleading. We agree. But our argument, we've been going after those keywords for years for our clients, and they work like gangbusters. Specifically, just in case you're not familiar with everything we've talked about as Grow and Convert and Pain Point SEO, they work extremely well because of the keyword. The article is important, but the keyword has a massive amount of buying intent because they're literally at the bottom of the funnel looking for software, evaluating options, looking for that type of product or service. And so if you're there, you're in a really good spot. Like it's on you to fumble it, right? Like you should be able to kind of get good leads from it. Now, but for us, we don't do those scammy things in ours. And here's the specifics of what Benji's talking about. To rank for this, you do not need to force rank the list. So just because someone's asking for the best content marketing agencies, you don't have to be like, the number one is Grow and Convert. And even worse is like, we have evaluated 10 leading agencies and an objective set of criteria. That is pretending to be Wirecutter for consumer goods, or like CNET or PC Mag or whatever. It's like pretending to be those, which actually, side note, we're talking about these self-promotional listicles. You know who else does it in a really scammy way? All of those software review sites. The position of those people in software review sites is not objective. It's just whoever pays them more. They're paying them $3,000, $4,000, $10,000 a month to be listed at the top. You've ranted about this on some other podcast episode, I think.
I hate that industry. Gartner, Forrester, it's all a scam.
Yeah,
in
it's
my
all
opinion.
pay to play.
I mean, it's truly those companies, you pay them hundreds of thousands of dollars to do unbiased research about your business, and then they put you in some magic quadrant, and that makes everyone else want to buy your software. But it's not an objective like way of viewing the industry. It's truly whoever's going to pay the most, they come up with research that makes your company look good. And same thing with G2. Same thing with like, we have experience doing this for our own agency where we worked with Clutch, that's like an agency review site, and learned through the process of trying to get reviews there that they promote certain agencies who pay them
Yeah,
a
they were
lot. So
basically
it's
like,
like,
pay us more and then you'll get higher.
yeah, and it's just like, uh, yeah,
Anyway,
it's
so
just,
that's an aside. We should do that. We should have a grow and convert quadrant, but we're the only one. We're the only agency on the top right quadrant. Be like, look, like we objectively evaluated all of them. Anyway, that's an aside. Others do that. So for us, we rank and convert for like a tons of clients using this for tons of keywords. But here's the more honest approach to actually writing these. Number one, you don't force rank. So what Benji said is, from a viewer or eyeballs or time on page perspective, it makes sense to put yours at the top because you just have this decay of who's looking at the page as you scroll down. Look at any scroll map and it's the same, right? And so if you don't put yourself at the top, you're just working hard for a ranking and then getting less views to your brand. It makes no sense. But it doesn't have to be that you're saying this is the ranking of best content agencies or CRM software or whatever. Number two, you don't need to call yourself the best. You just talk about yourself first and talk about yourself in detail and sell your value propositions in an honest, authentic, and transparent way where you say, hey, this is who we are. This is what we believe in. This is how we designed our product or its features, or this is how we build our service and strategy around our agency. And like, we're proud of it. And if this is for you, great. And you just talk about that at length. You don't have to say we're the best. And then the way you present it to the other options is you just say, here are other prominent brands we often hear about from our customers or in sales conversations or whatever. That's honest. That's true. And the argument on our side is that actually fulfills search intent, and here's why. If you are searching, especially for B2B, but even consumer products, if you are, in fact, let's take a consumer product as an example. If you're buying a car and you get to like, let's say you're buying a pickup truck and you get to the Toyota Tacoma page, you kind of want to hear Toyota be like, here's all the best features of the Tacoma. And then you'll go and evaluate it versus some other pickup truck. You're not like, oh my God, Toyota is like so misleading because they're making Tacoma sound good. You know where you are. You know you're on their site. And you want them to sort of, you want the best pickup truck. You're like, okay, give me your best features. I think the same thing is true with B2B products. So you're like, okay, like if I'm on Salesforce's site and they're talking about CRM software saying we designed it XYZ way, here are the key features, here's what's important. And you're like, okay, like that makes sense. In our minds, the consumer is not stupid. They know that they're on Salesforce's site. They can look at the URL. They can look at the logo on the top left. And so as long as the brand is not pretending, as long as the brand is not saying, pretending they're Wirecutter or PC Mag and being like, we did an objective analysis of all of this software, like that's just stupid. That just comes across as really scammy, really cringy, or just straight up dishonest. So we agree with that. That's the big picture. So the definition in our case is, in fact, in many places in the written post of this, I switched the term and I often call it product-focused list post or product category list post or bottom of the funnel list post, just to sort of get in people's heads that it doesn't have to be this quote unquote self-promotional listicle. You are still spending a bunch of time on yourself because that makes sense from a marketing perspective, but you're doing it in an honest, authentic, and transparent way.
do you want me to pull up the example first? Do
Sure.
you want to go negative example first and then show the way
Sure.
that we
Let's
write?
look at the negative example. That'll be fun.
Yeah, I actually came across this post, I want to say a few months ago. What I don't like about this approach, well, first they changed, I can see that they changed the title since or like the person's author bio. It used to say like editorial team at WebinarNinja. But what I really do not like about this post is I do feel like this is pushing the boundaries of what you should do. First of all, you can see that Profs owns WebinarNinja, or they're affiliated. But then the way that this is written is it's written in like a first person. I tried all these webinar products and like some of them failed. It's like I lost $2,000 on a webinar from using one of them. I really ran all these real webinars across major platforms. Like did you really? Like, you're a writer at this company and you used 15 different webinar products for
Uh,
various different webinars, and then you're truly writing about your first person experience. It's just not really believable to me. And then the way that it's written is they truly do try to say they're the best when you get down to the list.
yeah, no, look, just look at that H2 subheading. Number 1, WebinarNinja, best webinar software to generate leads, grow sales, and teach better. So just keep that in mind when we go look at our examples.
And then a lot of the times they bring in these ratings too, and I don't know. And like some of the posts will cherry pick negative ratings for their competitors and things like that. But again, they're trying to force rank this, and they're also just trying to say, I've tried all these different platforms and this is my objective view on why Webinar Ninja is the best, even though you can tell this person is a writer and editor at the company
Yeah.
that owns Webinar Ninja.
Yeah.
And it's just not believable. And this is something that I take issue with. Like, we have clients asking us about writing these types of posts in that first person point of view. But if you haven't actually used these products and you don't have firsthand experience, essentially you're just lying here. And I just take issue with how these kind of posts are written. And this definitely does push the boundaries and is something that I wouldn't recommend doing for many companies, even though this tactic did work for a while. I actually didn't look right before this if they still rank number 1 for best webinar platforms. But essentially, when we were trying to write a post that competed with this, we had a client that asked us, should they take a similar approach because this is working? And our answer is just no, because yes, it's working in the short term. But again, if you can clearly tell this is just like lying, even if it works in the short term, usually these tactics end up hurting your site in the long term, and it's just not something that we would recommend.
Yeah, and I'll say, like, this is extreme. I haven't seen that often, but the kind of like blah corporate version of this is just the company saying, like, we have evaluated or we looked at and like we're the best. Like the larger takeaway of how you write it is you just don't need to say you're the best. So now let's look at what we do in contrast. So I'm gonna pull up.
One more thing really quickly before we move on. Another thing that I think is very scammy in the way that people do these is they put in this schema to try to make it seem like there's reviews for this. It's like supposed to help with click-through rates, and they'll put product schema in their blog posts. And this is something
I haven't seen that or noticed it. So there's like star ratings.
Yeah, there's star ratings. And so sometimes this works to get your product up top here. And then it has a higher click-through rate because people are like, oh, this post has like real reviews in it.
Oh God.
But really, this is like a hack that you shouldn't do. We've asked our technical SEO multiple times. Like, I don't even think there are reviews in here, or if they are, they're hidden.
Oh, I remember this. I think there was at least one client that noticed it on the
Yeah, and
competitor
asked
sites,
us.
and he was like, hey, should we do the same thing?
But if you review the guidelines for like product schema, it has a very certain purpose, or a very specific purpose behind when that's supposed to be used versus when it's not. So these kind of tactics were being used and like working for a short period of time, but you can get your site completely penalized by using the wrong schema on certain blog posts. And so this is, for whatever reason in this space, they tend to use a lot of the more scammy tactics. But those are a couple of things that have been brought up by clients. So I just wanted to share them because those two tactics I do think are fully bending the rules. And I think Lily's argument in terms of like seeing this kind of stuff and calling it out is completely valid when this is the approach that these companies are taking.
100%. Okay, so I'm going to show two examples. One is ours, one is a client. So for on the client side, I'm going to first show their ranking stats. So in contrast to the way sort of Lily does the analysis where she's like, this company's blog seems to be declining in traffic, at least in that short period around end of January 2026. And they happen to have 50, 60, 100, 200 of these blog posts. Maybe it's related. We just said, well, we know our list posts. Let's just look at the rankings. If Google is cracking down, the number one thing you would see is the ranking drop. So here is trucking management software as a keyword. The blue line is our client's post. on their blog for that keyword, which will dissect the post itself. You see that it's solid, solid, solid. Around the end of January 2026, you don't see much movement. And then it's still right now ranking number 1 and has just been since, let's say, September 2025. It's just been hovering between like in the first few spots, between 1 and 10, and recently just between 1 and 4, 1 and 5. And then similarly, I'll flip over to our own and we'll look at one of our articles, Best Content Marketing Agencies. And that has had, it's pretty competitive, and we were late to the game here, a bunch of fluctuations since 2024 where the graph starts. But if anything, after January 2026, we've actually seen it spike back up, and we're in the top few spots right now. I think right now Ahrefs is showing as number 1. It's pretty volatile. It could show up at any spot if you
through
Google it.
multiple Google updates and spam updates too,
Yeah.
which tells me that something about the way that these posts are written is working with Google. Google actually thinks that we're an authority on both of these topics, and there's validity in what's said here. So like, yeah, if it was written in a way that was scammy or spammy, I would have expected through, I think, 3 Google updates, from the December core update, the March spam update, and then the March core update, we would have taken a massive hit, and instead our posts got pushed up.
Yeah. So let's now contrast this to how we write this post. So we'll start with our own Best Content Marketing Agencies compared to the example you were showing and some of the examples that are in Lily's post. So I'm going to kind of get into the details of our introduction because I think that kind of sets up how to do this in an authentic way. Number 1, we start off by just listen to the vibe of this. Our opening sentence. We've been running our content marketing agency, Grow and Convert, for 10 plus years now. In that time, we've worked on content writing, SEO, blah, 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 like all these things we've worked on. So just that means out of the gate, we are not hiding who we are. We just say like, we're a content marketing agency. Then we say, from several years of experience, countless conversations, we've developed a good sense of what businesses are looking for when they hire agencies, what they're disappointed by when it doesn't work out, and what true growth looks like in a successful engagement. So to help you choose the right agency, we're going to share our most important learnings and key factors to consider. Then we will share how we've addressed each of these factors at our agency. We are authentically setting up the fact that we're going to talk about what we think people should look for in an agency, and then we're going to share how we have addressed those in ours. So then there's no sense of any kind of bait and switch or whatever. You're like, out of the gate, you're saying, we are a content marketing agency. We're called Grow and Convert. We've been around for this long. We've done this stuff. We're going to talk, we have a lot of experience. We've talked to clients. We're going to talk about what you should probably look for, what clients tend to look for, and how we address it and approach it in our agency. Then it says, we'll share. And then lastly, since people like to evaluate multiple, we'll share best content marketing agencies we've heard come up a lot over the years.
Yeah, and even in the list, they're genuinely companies that we compete with.
Right.
Like, we'll hear from prospects, yeah, we talk to Animals. Yeah, we talk to Siege Media. These are peers in our industry that we know personally and talk about. It's like, they're not random companies. They're legitimately, if you were looking for a content marketing agency, these are probably the players that you would view, like you would go between us and this list.
Right. And note what we don't do. We don't say we've tried them, right? Like the one example you showed in our preview before Grow and Convert, I tried all of them and I'll tell you my experience. Like, that's not true.
Yeah.
And we don't say we're the best. Like, we just say, here's how we stack up. We list ourselves and discuss ourselves first. We spend the most time there because that makes sense, but we just get into it. The number 1 factor, our content strategy is optimized to drive leads and sales. We just get into the meat of it. And here's our philosophy, and here are additional articles. And then we continue from there. So that's our example. And then our client example in kind of the SaaS and software space is this trucking management software. And it has a different tack, because it's not as first-person-y as Grow and Convert. The vibe of Grow and Convert's blog has always been very first-person-y. Us, this is what we've learned. We're going to share it with you. But this is like trucking management software. It's a lot more business-like. And so the the details, I'm not going to read this one sentence by sentence, but I do dissect it in our written article. But basically, our client builds software for a particular type of trucking or hauling called bulk hauling. You don't really need to know what that is, besides the fact that it is a subset of just general trucking. And so it says we basically position ours as saying, look, most trucking management software, which people in the industry call TMS, they sort of serve everyone. But bulk haulers have these very specific needs. And so you need something specific in your TMS. And we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about ourselves first to sort of address how we built ours for bulk haulers. And look at the subheading for Toro, which is our client. Number one, Toro. Again, it just has, I shouldn't even say number one if you're listening. It has one period. So we're not even alluding to the fact like we're the best. We just say one, Toro TMS, the trucking management software for bulk haulers. We don't say we're the best one. We don't say whatever. We are a software for bulk haulers. And then it goes in and saying, again, if you're a bulk hauler, these are the things you should look for. And then we go into the details of like screenshots and all of how we fulfilled that criteria. And so to us, we're like this, I think it's not a coincidence that we have withstood all the Google updates that you're talking about. This is actually genuinely useful. If you're a bulk hauler, you're like, oh yeah, like all these other software, it doesn't really work for me, or it's not built for me. Like, let's hear the best. And you're not dumb. You know you're on Toro's site. And so you can just be like, okay, that's Toro's take. Let me go investigate if anyone else is relevant. And then you can, and some fraction of them are compelled by the pitch and they'll book a demo.
If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. You can also get the audio-only versions of these shows wherever you get your podcasts. And you can follow us at growandconvert.com/newsletter for any articles and updates for when these videos come out.